Patrick nearly punched Professor Odin in his smug alien face as he mocked Earth's beautiful ancient languages in front of the Xenolinguistics 401 class. He caught himself, fists clenched, knuckles white, pent-up rage boiling inside. If he failed to convince these pompous extraterrestrials of humanity's rich linguistic heritage, Earth would be forever branded as a crude backwater planet of simpleton savages. Patrick stood alone as the sole human student at the prestigious Kazon Intergalactic University, defending his species against thousands of skeptical aliens. Professor Odin, a brilliant but arrogant Kazon, pointed at hieroglyphs on the holographic display. "See these rudimentary pictograms? Egyptian is barely a step up from monkey scribbles." The lecture hall erupted in derisive alien chuckles. Condescending eyes bored into Patrick. Odin played a grating audio clip of Homer's Iliad. "Listen to that harsh cacophony of primitive grunts the Greeks called a language. Zero sophistication." Patrick's molars ground together, his tongue bloody from biting back retorts. Finally, Odin sneered at Sanskrit, the venerable language of ancient India. What empty gibberish, just pointless chanting from superstitious cavemen. Patrick shot to his feet, unable to contain his fury any longer. Voice quaking, he challenged Odin's shallow analysis, insisting the professor failed to grasp the deeper nuances of context and construction in Earth's ancient tongues. Purple with rage at being defied by an upstart human, Odin demanded Patrick sit. The young linguist held his ground, daring Odin to an open debate to defend his ancestral languages and expose xenophobic biases. Seeking to crush this impudent Terran, the Kazon agreed. In 1 week they would face off, dissecting an ancient human text of Patrick's choosing before the entire university. The battle lines were drawn. Student against master, man against alien. Should Patrick fail to prove the expressive power and brilliance of his forebears' words, his species' reputation would be forever ruined. But if he triumphed, he would open skeptical extraterrestrial eyes to the soaring achievements of the human tongue. The future of Earth standing among the stars hinged upon this war of words between two impassioned rivals. Patrick steeled himself for the challenge to come. Patrick spent the next 7 Earth days locked in his tiny campus dormitory, poring over every linguistic database and ancient text he could access on humanity's rich heritage of language. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. He survived on a diet of caffeine tabs and nutrient bars as he worked feverishly to construct an ironclad case for Sanskrit's sophistication and power of expression. After countless hours of research and meticulous translation, Patrick settled on an excerpt from the Rig Veda, among the most ancient and revered Sanskrit writings, as the crux of his argument. The chosen verses were a microcosm of the language's poetic brilliance and philosophical depth. When the day of the great debate finally arrived, Patrick stepped into the packed auditorium, to a cacophony of mocking alien jeers and whistles, with only a sparse scattering of humans to cheer him on. Odin swaggered onto the stage first, snatching the microphone. The arrogant Kazon belittled Patrick's selection with his own crude, butchered translation, twisting the Rigveda's words to sound like the incoherent ramblings of primitives. Bursts of cruel alien laughter echoed through the hall. Patrick's legs shook as he approached the podium, anger and nerves roiling in his stomach. The human linguist stood silent for a long, tense moment. Then he began to chant. Patrick's voice rang out, hauntingly melodic, perfectly intoning the rhythms and intonations of the ancient Sanskrit. The derisive din faded into rapt silence as he masterfully pronounced the intricate syllables, the aliens visibly captivated by the strange music of his words. Abruptly, Patrick ceased his chanting. "That, Professor Odin, is how the Rigveda is meant to be read," he declared, staring down his rival. Patrick launched into his own translation and analysis, unpacking the poetic structures, the metaphysical and philosophical meanings masterfully woven into each line. He laid bare the complex interplay of sound and sense, the web of allusions and wordplay that gave the text a rich multidimensionality. Disbelieving murmurs rippled through the alien audience as Patrick elucidated these linguistic intricacies. Building momentum, the human underscored how Sanskrit's unrivaled precision and versatility had powered groundbreaking advances in literature, mathematics, medicine, and even the birth of computer science. More than an ancient tongue, Sanskrit was the seed of high technology. The alien students and scholars looked stunned by these revelations, exchanging astonished glances. But Professor Odin was livid, his face flushing a deeper shade of purple with each insight Patrick shared. The Kazon leaped to his feet, voice booming. "Lies, the human speaks nothing but lies," Odin sputtered. "He invents false claims to cover the inadequacies of his monkey babble." Patrick whirled on his rival. "You speak from ignorance, not knowledge," he snapped back. "Sanskrit shares deep roots with your own language. Open your eyes and see the common linguistic heritage we share." At this, the Kazon attendees erupted in outraged shouts and howls, Odin leading the angry chorus. The debate degenerated into a riotous shouting match between the two factions. University administrators rushed the stage, waving for calm. "Enough! We will review the recordings and transcripts to determine the victor," they declared over the din. Patrick and Odin continued to trade insults as the authorities pushed them off the stage, the war of words still raging. The university's head administrator, an old Kazon male with jowls that quivered when he spoke, delivered the verdict a week later in front of the entire student body. After careful consideration of the evidence presented during the debate, this council finds that while the human Patrick Thomas offered some thought-provoking arguments about the sophistication of Earth's ancient languages, we believe Professor Odin's expertise and experience lend more credence to his interpretation. The human's claims, while intriguing, lack the academic rigor and proof of his esteemed Kazon colleague. Patrick stood in the front row, his hands balled into fists, jaw clenched as he absorbed this blow. The administrator droned on, but Patrick heard nothing but the blood pounding in his ears, his face burning with humiliation and fury. This wasn't a reasoned decision. It was a mockery of justice, a blatant display of the xenophobia and elitism that plagued the university. After the assembly, Patrick stalked back to the lecture hall to collect his materials, still seething. As he angrily threw his notes and books into his bag, he sensed a presence behind him. He whirled around to see a tentative Zortian, a curious Quilaxian, and a wide-eyed Vinian, all students, standing there. Patrick braced himself for jeers and taunts, but instead the Zortian spoke. "That was incredible what you shared about Sanskrit," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We've never heard anything like it. Could you teach us more?" Patrick blinked, stunned. "You want to learn about Sanskrit and other human languages?" The Vinian nodded vigorously, his antennae quivering. "The complexity, the layers of meaning, it's fascinating. We want to know everything." A slow smile spread across Patrick's face, his despair transforming into determination. "Absolutely, let's start now." Word of Patrick's impromptu language lessons spread like wildfire through campus. Soon he was holding regular tutoring sessions in empty classrooms, then auditoriums as dozens, then hundreds of alien students flocked to absorb his wisdom. They hung on his every word as he illuminated the intricacies of Sanskrit grammar, the dizzying heights of ancient Greek rhetoric, the subtle poetry of Mandarin Chinese. But as Patrick's popularity soared, so did Professor Odin's rage and paranoia. The Kazon academic began openly denouncing Patrick as a charlatan, a con artist seducing impressionable young aliens with wild tales and exaggerations. He hissed to anyone who would listen that the human was a secret agent, a linguistic saboteur sent by Earth to undermine Kazon cultural dominance. "He's filling their heads with lies," Odin snarled to his colleagues in the faculty lounge, "poisoning their minds against their own heritage. We must stop him before it's too late." A trio of Kazon linguistics professors decided to investigate Odin's claims. Disguising themselves in the robes of common students, they slipped into one of Patrick's overflowing seminars on Old English epic poetry. But as they listened, they found themselves captivated by the human's encyclopedic knowledge, his deft command of the material. The alien students buzzed with excitement, peppering Patrick with questions that he fielded with ease and enthusiasm. The professors exchanged troubled glances, This was no fraud or saboteur, but a brilliant mind and a gifted teacher. They began to wonder if Odin's crusade was rooted in academic integrity or petty jealousy. Patrick, caught up in the thrill of sharing his cherished languages, failed to notice the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Had he been paying attention, he might have detected the suspicious glares Odin threw his way, or the whispered conversations that halted abruptly when he drew near. He couldn't hear the secret message beamed from the Kazon homeworld to Professor Odin's computer terminal, the ominous orders from the High Command. "The human's influence has grown too strong," the Kazon general hissed from the flickering screen. "He threatens the purity and primacy of our language, our very way of life. You must silence him by any means necessary. Expel him, discredit him, but put an end to this vile propaganda before we lose a generation to the human's lies." Odin swallowed hard and nodded. "It will be done, General. I have a plan to destroy the human once and for all." As Patrick celebrated the success of his latest seminar, surrounded by eager alien pupils clamoring for more, Odin sat hunched in his darkened office, his face bathed in the sickly glow of a holographic display. Ancient Kazon lore scrolled before him, a cruel smile spreading across his features as he found the perfect weapon to bring his rival to ruin. Patrick's great war for linguistic truth was about to become a battle for his very future, and Odin was determined to emerge the victor. Under cover of darkness, Odin slipped into Patrick's dormitory, a cruel smirk twisting his alien features. Reaching into his robes, he produced an ornate box emblazoned with the university crest. Inside, an ancient Kazon tablet, a priceless linguistic relic. With gloved hands, Odin carefully slid the tablet beneath Patrick's bed, concealing it behind a stack of textbooks. Next, he placed a forged sales receipt on Patrick's desk, a damning paper trail suggesting the human had been fencing stolen artifacts on the intergalactic black market. Odin surveyed his handiwork with satisfaction, certain this evidence would seal Patrick's fate. At first light, Odin made an anonymous call to campus security from a public terminal. "A terrible crime has been committed," he rasped. "Patrick Thomas, the human linguist, has been looting the archives. Search his chambers, and you shall uncover the proof of his misdeeds." Within minutes, a squad of armed Kazon guards burst into Patrick's room, dragging the sleeping human from his bed. "What's going on?" Patrick demanded, bewildered and groggy. The guards offered no response, ransacking his belongings until they discovered the hidden tablet and incriminating receipt. "Patrick Thomas, you are under arrest for theft and trafficking of protected cultural artifacts," the lead guard snarled, snapping laser cuffs around Patrick's wrists. "You will face the disciplinary board to answer for your crimes." Dazed and protesting his innocence, Patrick was paraded across the quad in restraints, alien students gawking and whispering as he passed. In the disciplinary chamber, he found himself bound to a floating platform before a panel of grim-faced administrators, Professor Odin at the center. "Esteemed colleagues," Odin began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "I come before you with a heavy heart to present the case against Patrick Thomas, a human who has deceived and exploited our community." With theatrical flourish, Odin presented the damning evidence, painting a lurid picture of Patrick as a master thief, driven by greed and contempt for Kazon culture. "He seduced our innocent youth with honeyed words," Odin seethed, "all while plotting to steal our greatest treasures." "It's a lie," Patrick shouted, straining against his bonds. "I'm being framed. I would never betray your trust like this." But as he scanned the room, he saw doubt and suspicion etched on once friendly alien faces, his Zortian, Quilaxian and Vinian pupils shifting uneasily in their seats. Odin pressed on, presenting the receipt and tablet as irrefutable proof of Patrick's guilt. The human's protests sounded increasingly desperate even to his own ears. Just as the board seemed poised to convict, the chamber doors burst open. The disguised Kazon professors who had attended Patrick's sessions strode in, robes billowing. "Wait," the eldest cried. "This man is innocent. The evidence against him has been falsified by none other than Professor Odin himself." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Odin leaped up, sputtering with indignation, but the elder professor silenced him with a steely glare. "We have seen Patrick's passion and integrity firsthand," she declared, "and we have uncovered transmissions revealing that Odin was acting on orders from the High Command to destroy this human's reputation and end his teachings by any means necessary." With a wave of her hand, the professor projected the damning communiqué for all to see. Chaos erupted, administrators and students shouting over each other in shock and confusion. Accusations flew like daggers, Odin and his supporters trading barbs with Patrick's defenders. The disciplinary board, the bewildered Patrick still restrained before them, struggled to maintain order. After a hurried recess, they rendered their decision. "While it is now clear that Patrick Thomas did not commit the crimes of which he is accused," the head administrator declared gravely, "the discord and disruption caused by this affair leaves us no choice. To restore peace and stability to our university, both Patrick Thomas and Professor Odin are hereby expelled from this institution." Patrick reeled, the words hitting him like a physical blow. As the guards released him from his bonds, he found himself surrounded by his alien friends, their faces etched with sorrow and regret. "Please, stay and keep teaching us," the Vinian begged. "We can meet in secret, away from those who would stop us." But Patrick, his heart heavy with disillusionment and betrayal, gently pushed them away. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but I can't. Not after this. It's time for me to go home." Ignoring their pleas, Patrick gathered his meager belongings and boarded the next transport to Earth. As the university and alien spires dwindled behind him, he gazed out the viewport, with eyes that burned with unshed tears. He had come to this world hoping to build bridges of understanding through the power of language. But in the end, the ugly realities of politics and prejudice had torn them down. The great Kazon city faded into the distance as the transport climbed through the atmosphere. Patrick cast one final, longing look at the alien landscape that had been his home, then steeled himself for the lonely journey back to the human world that had become a half-remembered dream. The battle had been lost, but the war for truth and knowledge would go on, even if he had to carry on the fight alone. Years passed, but the scars of his battle at the Kazon University never fully healed. Patrick buried himself in his research, becoming Earth's preeminent expert on ancient languages. His published papers and acclaimed lectures shattered old misconceptions, illuminating the sophisticated communication systems of civilizations long dust. Yet even as his professional star soared, Patrick's thoughts often strayed to the alien friends he'd left behind, to the simmering conflict over linguistic liberty that had driven him from that world. He wondered if his sacrifice had made any difference, or if the old prejudices still strangled open inquiry. Then the message came. Patrick stared at the cryptic text glowing on his compad screen, his brow furrowed. "Return to Kazonia. Most urgent. All will be explained upon arrival." Patrick leaned back in his chair, rubbing his stubbled jaw. Every rational impulse screamed at him to ignore this summons from a blocked sender. Kazonia held only bitter memories and unresolved tensions. He flashed back to the devastated faces of his alien students, the withering disdain of the university administrators, the cruel triumph in Odin's eyes as he twisted the facts to destroy a human rival. Patrick shook his head, trying to dislodge the painful images. Reopening those old wounds would accomplish nothing. He had a good life here on Earth, a stellar reputation. Only a fool would walk back into that viper's nest. Yet a small, insistent part of him whispered that he had unfinished business out there among the stars. He still believed in the power of language to bridge even the widest cultural gulfs, if there was even the slightest chance that he could reignite that dream. After a long, sleepless night grappling with the decision, Patrick found himself boarding an interstellar transport, a single bag slung over his shoulder. He settled into his seat, watching the Earth fall away below, his heart a battleground of anticipation and dread. The journey to Kazonia was long, the silence of his cramped cabin broken only by the drone of the engines and the doubting voices in his head. His mind spun out 1,000 scenarios for what awaited him, each more improbable than the last. When the ship finally touched down on the Kazon homeworld, Patrick emerged into the harsh light of the red dwarf sun, his eyes widening at the sight before him. 3 hooded figures waited on the landing platform, their faces obscured, but their body language tense with urgency. Patrick squared his shoulders and strode forward to meet them. As he drew close, the figure in the center reached up and pushed back its hood, revealing a familiar face. It was the Zortian student from his long-ago tutoring sessions, her features hardened by time and trouble. "Patrick," she said, her voice tight, "thank you for coming. We desperately need your help." Over the next hours, huddled in a dingy safe house deep in the Kazonian underground, Patrick listened in growing astonishment as his former students laid out a staggering tale. In the years since the humans' expulsion, a clandestine resistance had taken root, driven by the revelations of the Kazon government's suppression of Earth's linguistic heritage. The Zortian, Quilaxian, and Vinian had become key leaders in this burgeoning movement, risking everything to spread the forbidden knowledge Patrick had first shared. They distributed illegal translations of human texts, taught secret classes on comparative linguistics, and slowly gathered more alien species to their cause. But now the resistance teetered on the brink of disaster. Professor Odin, seeing a chance to increase his own power, had attained a top advisory position with the Kazon High Command. From this perch, he pushed ever more draconian restrictions on the study of outside languages and cultures, denouncing the rebels as seditious traitors to Kazon purity. "He's turning the populace against us," the Zortian said grimly. "Our movement is being strangled before it can truly begin." She leaned forward, fixing Patrick with a fierce, pleading gaze. "But you can help us turn the tide. If you, the human who first brought this knowledge to our world, would publicly speak out against Odin's policies, it could lend our cause the legitimacy we need. Your voice could be the catalyst that sways hearts and minds." Patrick sat back, his head spinning. Part of him yearned to leap into the fray, to take up the banner of linguistic freedom and charge into battle, but doubt coiled in his gut. His presence had caused such upheaval on Kazonia before. Even with the best intentions, could he avoid doing more harm than good? His former students, seeing his hesitation, pressed their case with growing intensity. They spoke of the sacrifices they'd made, the comrades lost to Odin's brutal crackdown. They painted a chilling picture of a future where the Kazon government's control over language and thought was absolute. Patrick wavered, torn between conflicting fears and desires. Then, from a back room of the safe house, a Kazonian rebel rushed in, her face ashen. She activated a wall screen, pointing a trembling finger at the display. "You all need to see this." The screen flickered to life, revealing a crowded Kazon auditorium. A banner hung above the stage, emblazoned with the Kazon High Command's seal. And there, striding to the podium with a triumphant swagger, was Professor Odin. Patrick's blood turned to ice water as his old adversary began to speak. Odin's words were silky, reasonable, but laced with poison. He spun a tale of a noble Kazon culture besieged by insidious outside influences, of a human saboteur who had wormed his way into their youth's minds to sow chaos and doubt. "This human, Patrick Thomas, is the vanguard of a plot to destroy our way of life," Odin declared, his eyes flashing with zealous conviction. He and his terrorist confederates would tear down our linguistic purity, the very fundament of Kazon's strength. We must root out this menace without mercy. The camera panned over the audience, capturing rapt faces nodding along with Odin's words. Patrick felt a flicker of doubt. Then Odin motioned to an assistant, who began passing out handheld devices to the crowd. "I will now demonstrate the folly of the humans' heretical teachings," Odin said. "Using the most advanced linguistic AI, I will analyze the ancient Earth texts that Thomas so reveres, and expose them as the primitive, meaningless babble they are." With mounting horror, Patrick watched as Odin selected an excerpt from the Rig Veda, the same profound verses that the human had once used to illuminate Sanskrit's sophistication. At Odin's command, the AI began its dissection, ruthlessly parsing each word and phrase, discarding all context and nuance. Stripped of their resonance and beauty by the AI's cold logic, the lines that Patrick cherished were reduced to disconnected fragments, absurd shadows of their true meaning. Odin paced the stage, sneering as the AI completed its butchery. You see, these so-called masterpieces that Thomas champions are exposed as nonsense. This is the caliber of the human's vaunted knowledge, the rot he would inject into Kazon minds. On the screen, the Kazon audience muttered angrily, their faces twisted with revulsion. Some shouted epithets, denouncing humans and their poisonous culture. Patrick's heart sank as he recognized the seeds of xenophobia taking root. The Zortian rebel leader shut off the display, her expression bleak. Public opinion is turning against us. If we can't counter Odin's narrative, our movement is doomed. She turned to Patrick, a final desperate plea in her eyes. Will you help us? Will you speak out, set the record straight? Our future hangs in the balance. Patrick stood, indecision warring within him. But as he met the gaze of each brave rebel in that safe house, he knew he had no choice. This wasn't just a battle for linguistic diversity. It was a battle for the soul of a civilization. I'll do it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'll face Odin and his AI, and I'll fight for the truth with every fiber of my being. Let's show the Kazon the power and beauty of the human voice. The rebels erupted in ragged cheers, a thrill of hope energizing the room. Patrick smiled grimly, mentally girding himself for the confrontation to come. He knew the odds were long, the forces arrayed against them formidable. But in that moment, surrounded by valiant alien comrades, he felt something kindle in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose, a righteous fire that could illuminate the darkness of ignorance and demagoguery. The battle for Kazonia's linguistic future was about to begin, and Patrick would give it everything he had, even if it cost him everything he held dear. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.